Elric rode like a giant scarecrow, gaunt and rigid on the massive back of the Nihiranian steed. His grim face was set fast in a mask that hid emotion, and his crimson eyes burned like coals in their sunken sockets. The wind whipped his hair this way and that, but he sat straight, staring ahead, one long-fingered hand gripping Stormbringer's hilt. Occasionally Divim Slorm, who bore Mournblade, both proudly and warily, heard the blade moan to its sister, and felt it shudder at his side. Only later did he begin to ask himself what the blade might make him, what it would give him and demand of him. After that, he kept his hand away from it as much as possible. Close to the borders of Muran, a pack of Darajorian hirelings, native Jacorians in the livery of their conquerors, came upon them. Unsavoury louts they were, who should have known better than to ride across Elric's path. They steered their horses towards the pair, grinning. The black plumes of their helmets nodded, armour straps creaked and metal clanked. The leader, a squint-eyed bully with an axe at his belt, pulled his mount short in front of Elric. At a direction from its master, the albino's horse came to a stop. His expression unchanged, Elric drew Stormbringer in an economic, cat-like gesture. Divim Slorm copied him, eyeing the silently laughing men. He was surprised at how easily the blade sprang from its scabbard. Then, with no challenges, Elric began to fight. He fought like an automaton, quickly, efficiently, expressionlessly, cleaving the leader's shoulder plate in a stroke that cut through the man from shoulder to stomach in one raking movement, which peeled back armour and flesh, rupturing the body so that a great scarlet gash appeared in the black metal, and the leader wept as he slowly died, sprawling for a moment over his horse before slumping from the mount, one leg high, caught in a stirrup strap. Stormbringer let out a great metallic purr of pleasure, and Elric directed arm and blade about him, emotionlessly slaying the horsemen, as if they were unarmed and chained, so little chance did they have. Divim Slorm, unused to the semi-sentient Mournblade, tried to wield her like an ordinary sword, but she moved in his hand, making cleverer strokes than he. A peculiar sense of power, at once sensual and cool, poured into him, and he heard his voice yelling exultantly, realised what his ancestors must have been like in war. The fight was quickly done, and leaving the soul-drained corpses on the ground behind them, they were soon in the land of Muran. Both blades had now been commonly blooded. Elric was now better able to think and act coherently, but he could spare nothing for Divim Slorm, while intratemporally asking nothing of his cousin who rode at his side, frustrated in that he was not called upon for his help. Elric let his mind drift about in time, encompassing past, present and future, and forming it into a whole, a pattern. He was suspicious of pattern, disliking shape, for he did not trust it. To him, life was chaotic, chance-dominated, unpredictable. It was a trick, an illusion of the mind to be able to see a pattern to it. He knew a few things, judged nothing. He knew he bore a sword which physically and psychologically he needed to bear. It was an unalterable admission of a weakness in him, a lack of confidence in either himself or the philosophy of cause and effect. He believed himself a realist. Through the bleak night they rode, buffeted by a vicious wind, and as they came closer to the vale of Zanyor, the whole sky, the earth, the air became filled with heavy, throbbing music, melodious, sensual, great chords of sound. On and on it rose and fell, and following it came the white-faced ones. Each had a black cowl, and a sword which split at the end into 3 curved barbs. Each grinned a fixed grin. The music followed them as soon as they came running like mad things at the two men who reined in their horses, restraining the urge to turn and flee. Elric had seen horrors in his life. He'd seen much that would make others insane, but for some reason these shocked him more deeply than any. They were men, ordinary men by the look of them, but men possessed by an unholy spirit. Prepared to defend themselves, Elric and Divim Slorm drew their blades and waited for the encounter. But none came. The music and the men rushed past them and away beyond them in the direction from which they had come. Overhead suddenly they heard a beat of wings, a shriek from out of the sky and a ghastly wail. Fleeing, two women rushed by, and Elric was disturbed to see that the women were from the winged race of Muran, but were wingless. These, unlike a woman Elric remembered, had had their wings deliberately hacked off. They paid no attention to the two riders, but disappeared, running into the night, their eyes blank and their faces insane. "What is happening, Elric?" cried Divim Slorm, resheathing his rune blade, his other hand striving to control the prancing horse. "I know not. What does happen in a place where the dead god's rule has come back?" There was a rushing noise and confusion. The night was full of movement and terror. "Come." Elric slapped his sword against his mount's rump and sent the beast into a jerking gallop, forcing himself and the steed forward into the terrible night. Then mighty laughter greeted them as they rode between hills into the vale of Zanyor. The valley was pitch black and alive with menace, the very hills seeming sentient. They slowed their pace as they lost their sense of direction, and Elric had to call to his unseen cousin to make sure he was still close. The echoing laughter sounded again, roaring from out of the dark so that the earth shook. It was as if the whole planet laughed in ironic mirth at their efforts to control their fears and push on through the valley. Elric wondered if he had been betrayed, and this was a trap set by the dead gods. What proof had he that Zaratinia was here? Why had he trusted separates? Something slithered against his leg as it passed him, and he put his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready to draw it. But then, shooting upwards into the dark sky, there arose, seemingly from the very earth, a huge figure which barred their way. Hands on hips, wreathed in golden light, a face of an ape, somehow blended with another shape to give it dignity and wild grandeur, its body alive and dancing with colour and light, its lips grinning with delight and knowledge. Dar-Najan, the dead god. "Elric." "Dar-Najan," cried Elric fiercely, craning his head to stare up at the dead god's face. He felt no fear now. "I have come for my wife." Around the dead god's heels appeared acolytes with wide lips and pale triangular faces, conical caps on their heads and madness in their eyes. They giggled and shrilled and shivered in the light of Dar-Najan's grotesque and beautiful body. They gibbered at the two riders and mocked them, but they did not move away from the dead god's heels. Elric sneered. "Degenerate and pitiful minions," he said. "Not so pitiful as you, Elric of Melniboné," laughed the dead god. "Have you come to bargain, or to give your wife's soul into my custody, so that she may spend eternity dying?" Elric did not let his hate show on his face. "I would destroy you. It is instinctive for me to do so, but..." The dead god smiled, almost with pity. "You must be destroyed, Elric. You are an anachronism. Your time is gone. Speak for yourself, Dar-Najan. I could destroy you. But you will not." Though passionately hating the being, Elric also felt a disturbing sense of comradeship for the dead god. Both of them represented an age that was gone. Neither were really part of the new earth. "Then I will destroy her," the dead god said. "That I could do with impunity." "Sarrasinia, where is she?" And once again Dara Najan's mighty laughter shook the veil of Zanyor. "Oh, what have the old folk come to? There was a time when no man of Melniboné, particularly of the royal line, would admit to caring for another mortal soul, especially if they belonged to the beast race. The new race of the age you call that of the young kingdoms. What? Are you mating with animals, King of Melniboné? Where is your blood? Your cruel and brilliant blood? Where the glorious malice? Where the evil, Elric?" Peculiar emotions stirred in Elric as he remembered his ancestors, the sorcerer emperors of the Dragon Isle. He realised that the dead god was deliberately awakening these emotions, and with an effort he refused to let them dominate him. "That is past," he shouted. "A new time has come over the earth. Our time will soon be gone, and yours is over." "No, Elric, mark my words, whatever happens. The dawn is over, and will soon be swept away like dead leaves before the wind of morning. The earth's history has not even begun. You, your ancestors, these men of the new races even, you are nothing but a prelude to history. You will all be forgotten if the real history of the world begins. But we can avert that. We can survive, conquer the earth, hold it against the lords of law, against fate herself, against the cosmic balance. We can continue to live, but you must give me the swords." "I fail to understand you," Elric said, his lips thin and his teeth tight in his skull. "I am here to bargain or do battle for my wife." "You do not understand," the dead god guffawed, "because we are all of us, gods and men, but shadows playing puppet parts before the true play begins. You would best not fight me. Rather side with me, for I know the truth. We share a common destiny. We do not any of us exist. The old folk are doomed. You, myself, and my brothers, unless you give me the swords. We must not fight one another. Share our frightful knowledge, the knowledge that turned us insane. There is nothing, Elric, no past, present, or future. We do not exist, any of us." Elric shook his head quickly. "I do not understand you still. I would not understand you if I could. I desire only the return of my wife, not baffling conundrums." Dara Najan laughed. "No, you shall not have the woman unless we are given control of the swords. You do not realize their properties. They were not only designed to destroy us or exile us. Their destiny is to destroy the world as we know it. If you retain them, Elric, you will be responsible for wiping out your own memory for those that come after you." "I would welcome that," Elric said. Divim Slorm remained silent, not altogether in sympathy with Elric. The dead god's argument seemed to contain truth. Dara Najan shook his body so that the golden light danced and its area widened momentarily. "Keep the swords and all of us will be as if we had never existed," he said impatiently. "So be it." Elric's tone was stubborn. "Do you think I wish the memory to live on? The memory of evil, ruin and destruction? The memory of a man with deficient blood in his veins? A man called Friend Slayer, Woman Slayer, many other such names?" Dara Najan spoke urgently, almost in terror. "Elric, you have been duped. Somewhere you have been given a conscience. You must join us. Only if the Lords of Chaos can establish their reign will we survive. If they fail, we shall be obliterated. Good. Limbo, Elric. Limbo. Do you understand what that means? I do not care. Where is my wife? Elric blocked the truth from his mind, blocked out the terror and the meaning of the dead god's words. He could not afford to listen or fully to comprehend. He must save Tsaritsania. I have brought the swords, said he, and wish my wife to be returned to me. Very well, the dead god smiled hugely in his relief. At least if we keep the blades in their true shape beyond the earth, we may be able to retain control of the world. In your hands they could destroy not only us, but you, your world, all that you represent. Beasts would rule the earth for millions of years before the age of intelligence began again. And it would be a duller age than this. We do not wish it to occur, but if you had kept the swords, it would have come about almost inevitably. Oh, be silent, Elric cried. For a god, you talk too much. Take the swords and give me back my wife. At the dead god's command, some of the acolytes scampered away. Elric saw their gleaming bodies disappear into the darkness. He waited nervously until they returned, carrying the struggling body of Tsaritsania. They set her on the ground, and Elric saw that her face bore the blank look of shock. Tsaritsania. The girl's eyes roamed about before they saw Elric. She began to move towards him, but the acolytes held her back, giggling. Dara Najan stretched forward two gigantic, glowing hands. The swords first. Elric and Divimslorm put them into his hands. The dead god straightened up, clutching his prizes and roaring his mirth. Tsaritsania was now released, and she ran forward to grasp her husband's hair, weeping and trembling. Elric leant down and stroked her hair, too disturbed to say anything. Then he turned to Divimslorm, saying, "Let us see if our plan will work, cousin." Elric stared up at Stormbringer, writhing in Dara Najan's grasp. Stormbringer, Kirana Soliem Oglara. Divimslorm also called to Mournblade in the ancient tongue of Melniboné, the mystic sorceress tongue which had been used for rune casting and demon raising all through Melniboné's 20,000 years of history. Together they commanded the blades, as if they were actually wielding them in their hands, so that merely by shouting orders, Elric and Divimslorm began to work. This was the remembered quality of both blades when paired in a common fight. The blades twisted in Dara Najan's glowing hands. He started backwards, his shape faltering, sometimes manlike, sometimes beast-like, sometimes totally alien. But he was evidently horrified, this god. Now the swords wrenched themselves from the clutching hands and turned on him. He fought against them, fending them off as they wove about in the air, whining malevolently, triumphantly, attacking him with vicious power. At Elric's command, Stormbringer slashed at the supernatural being, and Divimslorm's Mournblade followed its example. Because the rune blades were also supernatural, Dara Najan was harmed dreadfully wherever they struck his form. "Elric," he raved, "you do not know what you are doing. Stop them. You should have listened more carefully to what I told you. Stop them." But Elric in his hate and malice urged on the blades, made them plunge into the dead god's being time after time, so that his shape sometimes faltered, faded, the colours of its bright beauty dulling. The acolytes fled upwards into the vale, convinced that their lord was doomed. Their lord also was so convinced. He made one lunge towards the mounted men, and then the fabric of his being began to shred before the blade's attack. Wisps of his body stuff seemed to break away and drift into the air to be swallowed by the black night. Viciously and ferociously Elric goaded the blades, while Divimslorm's voice blended with his in a cruel joy to see the bright being destroyed. "Fools!" he screamed. "In destroying me, you destroy yourselves." But Elric did not listen, and at last there was nothing left of the dead god, and the swords crept back to lie contentedly in their master's hands. Quickly, with a sudden shudder, Elric scabbarded Stormbringer. He dismounted and helped his girl-wife onto the back of his great stallion, and then swung up into the saddle again. It was very quiet in the Vale of Zanyor.